The Flash is one of the most iconic superheroes ever created. But here's the thing, there isn't just one Flash. There have been dozens of speedsters who've worn the lightning bolt, each one faster and more absurd than the last. So today, I'm breaking down every single Flash in DC Comics and everything that makes them unique. Starting with the original, the one who kicked it all off with a chemistry accident that sounds completely made up, Jay Garrick. Jay Garrick is the first Flash, full stop. He showed up in Flash Comics #1 in January 1940, and his origin story is one of the most beautifully ridiculous things in comic book history. Jay was a college student working in a laboratory when he accidentally inhaled hard water vapors. That's it. That's the superhero origin. He breathed in some weird steam and became the fastest man alive. No cosmic lightning bolt, no interdimensional energy field, just a guy who forgot to crack a window. And honestly, for 1940, that was genuinely creative. This was an era where a scientist had an accident was the gold standard for explaining superpowers, and hard water vapors sounded just scientific enough to work. His top speed was initially just under the speed of sound, which sounds laughable compared to later Flashes who casually break the light barrier, but in the golden age that made him practically a god. But Jay wasn't just fast. He could vibrate his body at high frequencies to blur his facial features beyond recognition. Molecular vibration as a disguise technique was established in 1940, decades before the Speed Force was even a concept. Jay was doing things with speed that writers wouldn't fully explain for another 50 years. His look became legendary too. The winged Mercury helmet, the red lightning bolt shirt. He was a founding member and first chairman of the Justice Society of America, appeared in all 104 issues of Flash Comics from 1940 to 1949, and basically defined what a speedster superhero could be. Now, later retcons quietly suggested that the hard water vapors didn't actually change his chemistry. They just activated a latent metagene, which conveniently retrofitted his origin into the Speed Force framework that wouldn't exist for decades. Classic DC. Can't just let a man inhale his steam in peace. But Jay's most important contribution came in 1961, when he appeared alongside Barry Allen in Flash of Two Worlds. That single story established that the Flash mantle wasn't tied to one person. It was bigger than any individual. Jay planted the seed for an entire mythology without even knowing it. Speaking of Barry Allen, he's the one who took that seed and turned it into something cosmic. Barry Allen. In October 1956, DC Comics didn't just introduce a new character. They rebooted an entire concept from the ground up and accidentally launched the Silver Age of comics in the process. Barry Allen debuted in Showcase #4, and his origin was everything Jay Garrick's wasn't. No quiet laboratory fumes, no slow realization. Barry was a forensic chemist standing in his lab when a bolt of lightning shattered a shelf of chemicals directly onto him. Drenched in electrified reagents, he woke up with superhuman speed. It was loud, it was dramatic, and it looked incredible on the page. But here's the thing about Barry that separated him from every speedster before and most that came after. He was a scientist first, a forensic chemist who spent his day job analyzing crime scenes and reconstructing evidence. So when he suddenly had access to impossible speed, he didn't just run fast, he studied it, he measured it, he treated velocity like a problem to solve, and that mindset produced the single most important invention in Flash history. In 1961, Barry built the Cosmic Treadmill. Published in the Flash #125, this device used cosmic rays and radioactive pulses coordinated with a cosmic ray clock to send its user through time. Let me say that again. A guy on a treadmill, running really fast, punching through the time barrier using calibrated radiation. It sounds absurd, and it kind of is, but what it implied was massive. Speed wasn't just a personal power anymore. It had a fundamental connection to time, space, and the structure of reality itself. Barry didn't name the Speed Force. That came later. But he built the intellectual scaffolding for it, brick by brick. Like the physicist he basically was. He also invented the Flash Ring, a tiny piece of jewelry that stored his entire compressed costume inside it for instant transformation. Every major Flash since has used some version of this. It's one of those small design innovations that quietly became permanent canon. Barry joined the Justice League in The Brave and the Bold #28 in 1960, standing alongside Superman and Batman as a founding member of DC's most important team. And then, in 1985, he died. Crisis on Infinite Earths took him out in one of the most iconic sacrifices in comic book history, running himself to death to save the multiverse. He stayed dead for over 2 decades, which is, not ideal for him personally, but it did something extraordinary for the Flash legacy. It gave the mantle weight, real, permanent, almost religious weight, the kind of weight that turned whoever wore it next into something more than just a replacement. And the person who picked up that mantle, he had some very big shoes to fill. Wally West. Wally West is the most important Flash ever created, and I can prove it. He first showed up in the Flash #110 in January 1960 as Kid Flash, making him the first true sidekick in DC history to fully inherit his mentor's mantle. Not through retirement, not through some planned succession ceremony. Through death. Barry Allen died in Crisis on Infinite Earths, and Wally had to pick up the suit knowing he got the job because the guy he idolized was gone. That's not a promotion. That's a funeral with extra responsibilities. Here's the thing, his origin is almost identical to Barry's. Lightning, chemicals, lab accident, the whole deal. DC essentially said, yeah, the same thing happened twice, and just moved on. But where Barry and Wally truly diverge isn't in how they got their powers. It's in what they did with them. When Wally first took over as the Flash, he was slower, significantly slower. We're talking restricted to roughly the speed of sound, which for a Flash is basically walking pace. Imagine inheriting Superman's cape and then finding out you can only bench press a sedan. For years, Wally operated as a diminished version of the hero everyone remembered. But here's where it gets interesting. Wally didn't just catch up to Barry, he lapped him. Where Barry approached the Speed Force like a scientist, measuring it, quantifying it, building treadmills to harness it, Wally treated it like something alive. Barry studied the Speed Force. Wally had a conversation with it, and the feats that came out of that understanding are genuinely absurd. He developed the infinite mass punch, a technique where by approaching the speed of light, his fist's relativistic mass increases to effectively infinite levels, delivering the force of 100,000 punches in a single strike. One punch. 100,000 punches worth of force, which is, not ideal for whoever's on the receiving end, but it gets crazier. Wally achieved trans-time velocity by combining his own speed with the accumulated speed of the entire Flash family and billions of other Speed Force conduits. The resulting velocity was measured in fractions of a Planck second, the smallest possible unit of time in physics. He was moving so fast that time itself stopped having meaning. Barry invented a treadmill. Wally broke the concept of chronology, and through all of this, the emotional core never disappeared. In The Flash #6 by Simon Spurrier and Mike Deodato Jr., Wally finally says what he's been carrying for decades. How do you tell your hero you're breaking under the weight of their legacy? Every speed record, every impossible feat, every moment he pushed deeper into the Speed Force was driven by a kid trying to prove he deserved to wear a dead man's suit. He went from the most diminished Flash to objectively the most powerful one who has ever existed, and he still wasn't sure it was enough. That's not just a superhero story, that's the best character arc in DC Comics. But if Wally's journey was about earning the legacy, the next Flash on our list had the opposite problem entirely. He was born into it, literally, and his body was tearing itself apart because of it. Bart Allen. Bart Allen is the cost of the Speed Force made flesh. Every other speedster got their powers and ran with it, sometimes literally. Bart got his powers and his own body started eating him alive. He first appeared in The Flash Volume 2, number 92 in July 1994, and right out of the gate, his story was different from every Flash before him. Born in the 30th century to Don Allen, the son of Barry Allen and Iris West, Bart was the first Flash connected to the legacy through direct bloodline. Not a nephew, not a lab accident, actual genetic inheritance. And that inheritance came with a price tag nobody would willingly pay. Here's the thing about Bart. His hypermetabolism was so extreme that his body aged at an accelerated rate. He physically looked like a teenager at only 2 years old. A 2-year-old trapped in a body that had already burned through puberty. His cells were running a marathon while the rest of him was still learning how to exist. Bart required massive quantities of food regularly just to prevent his body from collapsing in on itself, which is, not ideal. Sure, you can run faster than light, but you also need to eat like a competitive eater at a county fair every 4 hours or your organs shut down. But here's where it gets complicated. His accelerated healing only worked while he was at rest. Not during combat, not while running, only when he stopped moving completely. Every other speedster could shrug off damage mid-fight. Bart had to survive the fight first, then hope he could sit still long enough to recover. That's a terrifying limitation when your entire power set revolves around not sitting still. And yet, his body had one trick that almost made up for it. When someone hit him with a drug designed to negate his super speed, his hypermetabolism just pushed the toxin out almost immediately. His biology treated the chemical attack like a mild inconvenience. You literally could not drug this kid into being normal. His body rejected the concept. On top of all that, Bart could vibrate his molecular structure to phase through solid objects, and his Speed Force aura protected him from friction, heavy impacts, and G-forces. But he also possessed retrocognition abilities, suggesting he carried memories of the pre-Flashpoint timeline, meaning Bart didn't just run fast. He remembered realities that no longer existed. He carried the ghost of a deleted universe in his head, while his own body tried to consume itself. Cool. Add that to the list. His character arc from Impulse to Kid Flash to Flash is one of the most genuinely poignant progressions in DC. A coming-of-age story about a kid who literally aged too fast, compressed into a superhero narrative. He grew up before he was ready because his biology didn't give him a choice. And then the mantle demanded he grow up again emotionally, a kid with godlike speed whose greatest enemy was always his own metabolism. But if Bart represents the cost of inheriting the Speed Force through blood, the next Flash on our list got her powers in a way nobody in the Allen family could have predicted: Avery H. Ho. Imagine getting superpowers, and they immediately ruin your life. Not in a cool, dramatic way. In a you literally cannot stop vibrating way. That's Avery Ho's introduction to the Speed Force. And honestly, it might be the most realistic depiction of what would actually happen if a normal person suddenly got super speed. Avery first showed up in The Flash Volume 5, Issue 3 back in September 2016. During Joshua Williamson's run on The Flash, Central City got hit with a Speed Force storm. Lightning rained down across the city, striking dozens of ordinary citizens and granting them speedster abilities overnight. No lab accident, no family bloodline, no mentor carefully guiding the process. Just cosmic lightning hitting random people like a supernatural lottery. And Avery happened to be standing in the wrong place at the right time. Here's where it gets interesting, though. Most of those new speedsters gained some degree of control pretty quickly. Avery didn't. Her psychological state when the lightning hit left her trapped in constant vibration, oscillating at frequencies so high she couldn't stop moving, couldn't interact normally with the world, and was effectively paralyzed despite having the raw power to outrun a car. She had super speed, and it made her less mobile than a regular person, which is, not ideal. But this is exactly what makes her important to the Flash mythology. Every Flash before Avery gained their powers through deliberate circumstances, genetic predisposition, or at least controlled environment. Barry had his lab. Wally had Barry standing right there to explain what was happening. Bart was literally born into it. Avery got zapped by a cosmic thunderstorm while going about her Tuesday, and her struggle to gain control proved something the comics had never really explored. Raw Speed Force power means absolutely nothing without discipline and mentorship from people who actually understand what's happening to you. The bigger implication is what her existence says about the Speed Force itself. Before the storm, the Flash mantle was essentially a Western phenomenon. American labs, American cities, American families passing the torch. Avery became the Flash of China, and her origin suggested the Speed Force wasn't just passively available to whoever stumbled into the right chemicals. It was actively distributing power globally, across cultures, across continents, through what amounted to a mass casualty weather event. The Speed Force had its own agenda, and that agenda apparently included democratizing superhuman speed, whether humanity was ready for it or not. Now, I'll be honest, Avery's canonical material is thinner than most Flashes on this list. She hasn't had the decades of storylines that Barry or Wally have accumulated, but what she represents is more significant than her page count suggests. She's proof that the Flash mantle isn't a family heirloom or a lab accident waiting to happen. It's a global phenomenon, and the Speed Force is big enough to contain all of them. But if Avery proved the Speed Force could choose anyone, the next Flash on our list proved you could basically hack your way in with a math equation. Jesse Quick. Most speedsters get their powers the same way. Lightning, chemicals, maybe a cosmic storm if they're lucky. Jesse Chambers got hers by saying math out loud. And somehow, that's not a joke. Jesse Quick first appeared in The Flash number 91 in June 1994, created by Mark Waid and Greg LaRocque as a deliberate legacy character built from the ground up. Her father was Johnny Quick, a Golden Age speedster. Her mother was Liberty Bell, a Golden Age superhuman with incredible strength. Jesse inherited both power sets, which already makes her one of the most uniquely equipped speedsters in DC history. But the real story here isn't the dual inheritance. It's how she accesses the Speed Force in the first place. Her father, Johnny Quick, didn't get struck by lightning. He didn't fall into a vat of chemicals. He could tap directly into the Speed Force, a linguistic and mathematical incantation, not a power source in the traditional sense, more like a password to a cosmic Wi-Fi network that lets you run faster than light. Jessie inherited this method. Her connection to the Speed Force relied entirely on visualization of the formula and the mental discipline to maintain focus on the mathematical expression while it served as her access key. Lose concentration, lose the speed, which is, not ideal when someone's trying to kill you. Here's where it gets interesting. Jessie's formula-based access proved something nobody had really established before. The Speed Force wasn't just reactive. It wasn't just something that happened to people through freak accidents or genetic lottery. It could be deliberately invoked through intellectual and spiritual preparation, mental discipline, linguistic repetition, mathematical conceptualization. No chemicals, no lightning, just a brain doing very specific math very fast. That's the Speed Force's most esoteric access access point, and Jessie is the proof it works. On top of the speed, Jessie could fly. Actual flight. That's not something most speedsters can claim in main DC continuity. Wally can't fly, Barry can't fly. Jessie just casually added it to her resume like it was nothing, and when she temporarily lost her speed powers entirely, she didn't retire. She pivoted to the Liberty Bell identity, drawing on her mother's superhuman strength instead. Eventually, she regained her Speed Force connection and came back as Jessie Quick, because apparently losing access to a cosmic force is just a temporary inconvenience when your family tree is that stacked. She also had a long romantic relationship with Rick Tyler, the modern Hourman, which connected her even deeper into DC's sprawling legacy system. Jessie wasn't just a speedster. She was a bridge between the Golden Age and the modern era, between the Justice Society and the Flash family, between raw physical power and something closer to mystical invocation. The formula is what makes her matter in this conversation. Every other Flash on this list got their powers through some variation of thing happened to my body. Jessie got hers through thing happened in my mind. That's a fundamentally different relationship with the Speed Force, and it opened doors that hadn't existed before her. But if you think accessing the Speed Force through math is strange, wait until you hear about the guy who got his powers by accidentally time traveling from the 27th century, John Fox. Every Flash we've talked about so far has one thing in common. They all exist in roughly the same era. Give or take a few decades, they're all running around in the present day, connected to the same events, the same cities, the same timeline. John Fox is not. He's from the 27th century, and his entire existence basically proves that the Speed Force doesn't care what year it is. John Fox first appeared in Flash Special number 1 in July 1990, created deliberately for the 50th anniversary of The Flash. DC named him after writer John Broome and creator Gardner Fox. So, right from the start, this character was a love letter to the legacy itself. He's literally named after the people who built the mythology he'd eventually become part of. Here's what makes his origin so good, though. John Fox wasn't a superhero. He wasn't a scientist who got struck by lightning. He was a historian for the National Academy of Science in Central City, 700 years in the future. His entire job was studying the Flashes. He knew everything about Jay Garrick, Barry Allen, and Wally West the way you'd know about historical figures from a textbook. And then he accidentally became one, a villain named Manfred Moda, who had fought all three previous Flashes during their respective eras, resurfaced in the 27th century after being dormant for 700 years. Fox was sent backward through time to recruit Jay, Barry, and Wally to come help. He found all three of them, made his case, and every single one of them said no, which is, not ideal when the fate of your entire century depends on getting a yes. But here's where it gets interesting. During the process of being bounced through time, the temporal displacement itself granted John superhuman speed. The historian who spent his career studying speedsters became a speedster. He defeated Moda on his own. The guy who couldn't convince anyone else to save his world ended up saving it himself with powers he never asked for. Then, he tried to go home, and overshot. By a lot. Instead of landing back in the 27th century, John Fox ended up in the 853rd century, where he joined the Justice Legion A as one of that era's greatest heroes. He's operating alongside beings so advanced that the power levels are essentially incomprehensible by modern standards, and he's still relevant, still fast enough, still the Flash. One detail that doesn't get talked about enough is his weakness. John Fox was uniquely vulnerable to chemical and pharmacological attacks. Now think about every other Flash origin we've covered. Jay inhaled chemical vapors. Barry was doused in chemicals and struck by lightning. Chemicals are literally the thing that creates Flashes. And the one Flash who wasn't created by chemicals is the one who's most vulnerable to them. That's either brilliant irony or cosmic cruelty, and honestly, it might be both. What John Fox really represents is proof that the Speed Force isn't bound by time. It exists in the 27th century. It exists in the 853rd century. It exists everywhere. He's the first speedster to function entirely outside the primary timeline, and his existence suggests the Speed Force is a fundamental cosmic constant, woven into reality regardless of what century you're standing in. The historian became the history. Sometimes the Speed Force just has a sense of humor. But if you think a Flash from the far future is a strange concept, wait until you see what happens when Wally West exists in a world where every hero has completely lost their way. Wally West of Earth 22. Every Flash we've talked about so far found a way to make the Speed Force work for them. Jay grounded it, Barry studied it, Wally mastered it, Bart survived it. But in 1996, Mark Waid and Alex Ross painted a version of the future where the Speed Force won. Kingdom Come was an Elseworlds miniseries illustrated entirely in gouache, which already tells you this wasn't your standard comic book. Ross painted every single panel like a Renaissance oil painting, and the story matched that weight. The premise was simple and devastating. What happens when the next generation of heroes loses its moral compass? When the line between hero and villain dissolves completely? In that world, Wally West started out fine. He was a hero for years. Good intentions, genuine moral character, the whole package. He protected Keystone City the way he always had. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. He stopped stopping. That's the phrase that matters. He stopped stopping. His pursuit of crime became so consuming that he stopped existing as a person and started existing as weather. He patrolled Keystone City at speeds so incomprehensible that he wasn't a man running anymore. He was a continuous blur, a red streak that never paused, never rested, never made a conscious decision to act, just motion. Endless, directionless, purposeless motion, like a tornado that forgot why it started spinning. Here's the thing. Every other Wally West story is about a guy learning to harness the speed force, to evolve from sidekick to spiritual master. Kingdom Come Wally is the exact inverse. He didn't lose his powers. He lost himself. The speed force didn't abandon him. It consumed him. He had more speed than any version of himself had ever possessed, and it meant absolutely nothing because there was nobody left inside to use it. And that's what makes this version so important to the entire Flash legacy. He's not a villain. He's not corrupted by some external force or manipulated by a reverse Flash. He just ran so long and so hard that the running became the point. The heroism evaporated. The man evaporated. All that remained was velocity. It raises a question that Kingdom Come never directly answers, but absolutely wants you to sit with. Was this inevitable? Is this what happens to every speedster eventually if they run long enough? Or did this Wally make specific choices that the primary timeline Wally didn't? Because if it's the first option, then every Flash we've covered today is on a timer. And if it's the second, then the Speed Force isn't the thing that matters at all. The person is. That's Kingdom Come's central thesis applied directly to the fastest man alive. The moral substance of the hero matters more than the magnitude of the power. You can be faster than light, faster than time, faster than thought itself. And if you've lost the reason you started running in the first place, you're just wind. You're just noise. The Speed Force doesn't care about you. It's a cosmic principle. It has zero opinions about your well-being, your relationships, your sense of purpose. It will give you everything and take everything in return if you let it. Every Flash in this video understood that on some level. Jay kept himself grounded. Barry built machines to control it. Wally learned to commune with it. Bart fought against its cost every single day. Jesse accessed it through discipline. John Fox carried it across centuries. Avery seized it from chaos and shaped it into something meaningful. And Kingdom Come's Wally, he let it run him instead of the other way around. He became the fastest cautionary tale ever written. The power was never the point. It was always about the person holding it. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.